Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video, and in this one I want to talk a little bit about the latest two episodes of the Avatar Braving the Elements podcast. So this will be episode 2 and 3 of the podcast. 2 came out on Friday and 3 came out just basically an hour ago, and I have finished listening to it. So what the last two episodes were basically this: origin stories with Mike DiMartino and Brian Konietzko. So the part 1 and part 2 of the podcast interview with Mike and Bryan. Now, I didn't do a video on Friday because I felt the first part of the interview was kind of just like stuff that we've heard before. It was basically Mike and Bryan, the college years. If you know about sort of the history of these two, sort of how they met, what they worked on before Avatar, you've probably heard basically the core of all of the stories that they told in this first section of the interview, especially if you've read like the art book or seen that that documentary that they put out about the making of Avatar. There's not a lot here that's new, and there is just the fact that they barely touch on Avatar. Like, they only, like, the last 5 minutes of the first episode are really the only time they really get to Avatar. Now, I was wondering what they were going to do for the second half of the interview, and it was a little bit like when I saw the episode come up and it's Origin Stories Part 2, I was kind of like, oh, we're still going with early Avatar here. Now, straight away, I will say that right at the end, Janet Varney does ask the two of them anything you can say about Avatar Studios, and I have the audio here to kind of play from that. So that's pretty much what I'm going to play here, because otherwise what the second part of the interview is just they're finally at Avatar and discussing how they went about the kind of early stages of production. Again, if you've read the art book, you've probably again heard similar stories like this about their approach and so on. There is a few nice stories here, and it's very interesting that they're talking about this, the early pre-production on Avatar, while they're in pre-production basically on new Avatar shows. So there's a kind of interesting dynamic there, but they don't really make too many comparisons, of course. But the next, I think it's about 2 minutes maybe, while the two of them talk about this, is Janet Varney asking the question and Mike and Bryan giving their answer. Now, I don't know how long ago this interview was recorded, but obviously there's nothing particularly like newsy about this, but it is nice just to hear them talk a little bit more about Avatar Studios.
Those are great choices. And then have to ask, understand that you probably can't say much about it, but is there anything you can tell us about Avatar Studios and kind of the future of where things are going?
Just that we are working hard on some new stories. We're overseeing the whole franchise, so it's going to take a while before new stuff starts percolating out there, but rest assured we are working hard to satisfy the desires of everyone.
We just keep tapping into this wellspring in the way that inspires us and finding great creative partners to work with us and to help us explore these ideas. And so, yeah, Mike and I have sort of mapped out a very ambitious, multi-tiered, I don't know, it feels like a big octopus. And we're just looking at how we can go deeper into this big, rich, largely untapped history and future in the Avatar world. So there are ideas that we've been excited about for a long time that we're finally getting to really dive into. And then there's things that we're just figuring out and just getting really excited about. And if we were just trying to take requests, and it's not the way to carve out a big fantasy universe. But go ahead, Mike, sorry.
Oh, no, it's the cool thing I think we can say about it, that without giving anything away, is like the way we're approaching it now is like so different than Avatar. You know, we're coming in now and we have unprecedented support from Nickelodeon, so it is the franchise and like the shows and animated stuff, but also, you know, other stuff beyond, and publishing and podcasts like you're doing and all that stuff. So just to have this like super big picture, like Bryan was talking about big picture, I like big picture things, like looking at this giant picture. We're not like, oh, we have all these ideas, we might maybe we'll get to make one of them, but it's like, oh, we have all the ideas and ideally we're going to get to over the years explore all of them and get to make them. But it'll take some time.
A lot of time. It's a long plan, and again, it is multi-tiered. And what's neat is that we want each of these projects to have its own feeling, its own tone and look, and so it will all feel true to the Avatar world, but they will all be very different expressions of it. So it will really deepen it and expand it. And we've been lucky that the 2 series we've made already reach quite a diverse, international, young, old audience, people that really aren't even into animation or maybe don't even have kids but have ended up watching the show. I think the new stuff will even push into other audiences, As always, we're not chasing audiences. It's always just like, got to start from that genuine inspiration and that test audience of us. Just, is this what we think feels true to Avatar? Is this what we think we're excited to tell? And I think it's amazing how, when I was in high school reading Lord of the Rings, and I just loved it, it inspired me to try to write my own stories as a teenager and to illustrate them. And the way fans interact with stuff now is so creative and interactive, and they're using the show as, we were talking.
I think that's the core of what they say about Avatar Studios, and then there's only, like, as you can see there, about like 4 or 5 minutes left in the podcast after that, and they kind of wrap it up there. So obviously nothing particularly new. Like, do they say anything there that is that different than what they said in their initial statement, I think, that they gave to EW, which was, expand the franchise, different timelines and stuff like that? They basically just say a little bit more on that, the idea of this multi-tiered system, which I guess is what they're referring to in terms of like movies, series, like spin-offs, one-shots, miniseries, and then you've got the short-form content. And then Mike mentions the idea of they having the support this time from Nickelodeon to basically do everything. They are allowed to have a plan beyond just one project this time, and that extends obviously into multiple animation projects, but also, as he says, publishing, merchandising, and even stuff like the podcast is like part of the new approach of Avatar Studios, is to have much more official stuff for Avatar and for it all to work together and really form it into more of a franchise, and not just basically 2 shows that have a little bit of extra support behind them, but rather the Avatar franchise is now properly going to expand out. And I really like stuff like Bryan saying that largely unexplored, because that is the truth. Look at the timeline. It is largely unexplored. You have the one beginning stuff here. You basically skipped like 9,000 plus years to get to the furthest Avatar back from there, which is like Zito, or I suppose you can say the Avatar Hundun fought is like somewhere in between, but still it's much closer to the modern Avatars than it is to the ancient Avatars. And then there's still tons of ground to work with the likes of Zito and all the other Avatars, Kyoshi and everyone. And then you can see by what they say, like they're not just going off like fan requests. They're not just going to be telling the stories that are the most sort of wanted by fans. And this is why obviously us speculating about what projects will be done in Avatar Studios is obviously very difficult, because you can see throughout the interview, if you do listen to it, Mike and Bryan are creative people, that they want to do new stuff typically. Now, I'm assuming part of expanding the world will be continue to expand on Avatar and Korra, but I am wondering perhaps if, they might leave that to the novels and the books, and they'll do all new stuff for their projects, apart from maybe like, the odd thing. But it's just interesting. I like that they at least gave a comment, but you can tell that it's nothing more really than what was said. It's just clarifying the statement that we already have. And admittedly, like this podcast was likely recorded a few months ago, and that I think Mike and Bryan on their social media post talking about the podcast kind of said that they have been on multiple episodes. So I get the impression that this is probably one of the earlier things, because they do get across the idea that I think I think Bryan at some point during the podcast mentions that he listened to the first episode, which obviously they'd recorded before, and he gave them like sort of like a little bit of feedback at the end. It's just a kind of like in-joke type thing. So I don't really know what the situation is there, but the other point would be that Mike, who answered the question first, did say like you're a while off from seeing anything happening. Now I think that's him saying before you like directly like see any of it released, like actually you see episodes, which I think is different than just news on what they are up to. But they clearly have a plan in place, and I hope sooner rather than later they can tell us a little bit about that plan. What is the first phase of this plan? What are the first couple of projects? That's what we want to know. And I think, like I said, I think in my video like yesterday, discussing will we get news at Comic-Con, I think the worst thing that they could do with this is keep us in the dark for a huge amount of time. To me, like February, you announced Avatar Studios. There's now a countdown timer in a way of just like, how long until the next piece of news? Like, how long are you fine with Avatar Studios just existing as a concept when you actually going to get to, you know, revealing the actual information that we want? Because right now the speculation pretty much is just suggestions on shows that, as you've kind of heard here, they don't really listen to that sort of feedback. I suppose they roughly know what fans like, but they won't let that completely determine the direction that they're going in with the stories, which is fine. So, you know, what's happening. But yeah, it's an interesting one in that my suggestion would probably be that, like, if you are interested in Mike and Bryan and Avatar, like, I'd say listen to the second podcast, the Origin Stories Part 2. You probably, in my mind, don't really need to listen to Part 1, just because it discusses Avatar so little, basically. But, you know, they're only like two, like, less than an hour long podcasts, so, you know, check them out if you want. At the end, they did say that they're going back to the next episode is going to be returning to the reviews. So I guess we'll be getting the Avatar Returns review. So we'll see how they go from here in terms of their format, and when they have other interviews on, are all interviews going to be a separate thing? Or, like I've discussed before, are they going to be having the interview guest, like a voice actor for a specific character, on the episode review with them or not? We'll see how that goes. So yeah, they're my thoughts on the Mike and Bryan interview. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on, you know, if you've listened to one part, both parts, and especially the kind of clip I played there. What are your thoughts on what they said here in terms of a little bit more of an update to Avatar Studios information? Not that there was really anything particularly new. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.